All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Maureen Conway. I'm Vice President here at the Aspen Institute and Executive Director of our Economic Opportunities Program, and I am so delighted to welcome you all today to our launch of the Communities That Work Partnership. We're thrilled to be working with the Commerce Department on this really important initiative. I just want to say a couple of things before we get started, because we have a real treat for you today to hear our Commerce Secretary in conversation with Walter Isaacson. Is a real delight. So let me just say a couple of quick things first. I would like to also acknowledge and thank the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, which has provided an important co-investment in this work with the Commerce that we're doing with the Commerce Department. I also want to note that we're recording and we're live streaming this event today. So if you're on the live stream, please tweet away at us at the hashtag Communities That Work. And if you're here in the room, please do quiet your phone. Third, following the event today, we will have the application materials for the regions up on our website. That's as.pn/communitiesthatwork. That website address is written down in materials and everything, so you won't lose it, but just want to let you know that that's going to be going live today. And that's all I need to say for my announcements, but it is also my distinct pleasure and thrill to introduce to you Jay Williams, Secretary of Commerce for Assistant Secretary of Commerce, I'm promoting you, for Economic Development. And he's going to provide a word of welcome and some thoughts about the importance of this work to the Commerce Department. Thanks, Jay.
Okay. Thank you, Maureen, and I'm exceptionally excited and pleased to be with you here today as we publicly launch the Communities That Work Partnership. This is an important initiative that will help build the critical public-private partnerships needed to accelerate job skills development across the nation. I want to thank the Aspen Institute for the hospitality in hosting us here today. As we know, the availability of a skilled workforce is often cited as a primary factor considered by businesses in their investment decision process. The learning exchanges created through this initiative will help meet the skills needs of businesses by identifying, promoting, and expanding on successful industry-driven regional partnerships for talent development. By encouraging such partnerships, the program will help build the regional pools of workers with the skills that are in demand by employers in their communities, leading to job creation and increased business investment. EDA is pleased to be partnering with the Aspen Institute on this initiative. Through our partnership, we will help to build, sustain, and scale existing and new regional partnerships for talent development in support of regional economic development. And critically, Aspen, through this partnership, will also inform on a long-term talent and skills development strategy for the Economic Development Administration. This partnership offers many exciting opportunities ahead as a testament to the focus of Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker, who for the first time in the history of the Commerce Department has made workforce development a key focus of the Department of Commerce. Through the Secretary's Open for Business agenda, the Department is advancing a bold policy framework centered on the tools needed for U.S. economic growth. Secretary Pritzker is a business leader with more than 25 years' experience as an innovator and a builder of businesses in various sectors. She has focused the Department of Commerce on expanding trade and investment, spurring American innovation, and unleashing government data to benefit economic developers and businesses alike. All of these priority issues are of the utmost importance to our communities and to our regions. We are proud of the key role that EDA plays in advancing the Secretary's Open for Business agenda, and I am honored to work very closely every day with Secretary Pritzker to ensure that our nation's communities and regions capitalize on the expanding economy. We are obviously, of course, fortunate to have Aspen President and CEO Walter Isaacson here with us today to lead our discussion. Walter is a man who wears many hats and wears them all exceptionally well. Walter, thank you for your participation and for your leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to turn the program over to Walter Isaacson.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being our partners and selecting us as partners. Secretary Pritzker, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Walter.
Why is skills development such a priority for you now?
Well, Walter, first of all, as you know, for years this has been a passion of mine to make sure that we not only develop the workforce that businesses need in order to grow and continue to create jobs, but that the workforce itself is getting the training and opportunity it needs to be able to our individuals in our country be successful. So this is something that's been a passion of mine, since we started working together, I think in 2009 on this subject. But it's really important for us to bring the issue of workforce development and skills training to the Department of Commerce, because our job is to try and set the conditions for American businesses to thrive. Because if American business is thriving, then they will create jobs and our economy will grow and we will have a prosperous society. So it's a pretty simple formula. Without a workforce that has the skills that are in demand in an ever-changing economy, the formula doesn't work, if you will. So it's important, particularly because we at the Department of Commerce have the relationship with businesses. And ultimately, at the end of the day, businesses need to lead by defining what are the skills that they need. And I don't think that's been so clear lately.
When you do Manufacturing Day, which is an innovation you've had, what do you learn when you go visit manufacturers of the 21st century?
Well, I'm really excited. We're going to have our third annual Manufacturing Day. And one of the things that Manufacturing Day why Manufacturing Day? We realized there was a real misunderstanding in the United States about what is a career in manufacturing today. What is the interface between the human and the machine that's necessary to make product in the 21st century? And so we have been working with manufacturers, and last year we had 1,500 manufacturers that opened their doors to over 300,000 people in the United States, mostly, let's call it grade school and high school kids with their counselors, coming in and saying, oh my, this is not my father or my grandfather's manufacturing plant anymore. This has really changed. It's a lot about computers. It's a lot about humans working alongside robots to create things. And what have we learned? We've learned that there's a real image issue with manufacturing. It's hard today to know what that is and know what manufacturing means. So we're trying to change the awareness and understanding so that families no longer say, oh my goodness, if my child or my son or daughter goes into manufacturing as a career, is that something that has longevity? For the first time in the United States since 2009, we are growing manufacturing output in the United States. We've also grown almost 900,000 new manufacturing jobs. So this is becoming an area of growth, but it's a different career than it was 25 or 30 years.
So what new skills do you need to go into it?
Well, you need knowledge of how a computer works. You need knowledge of how to adjust machines. You need to, there's a interface of information that goes on where the machine may say, here's where we need to tweak the production, and then knowing how to then bring the mechanical talents to bear. So it's a set of skills that's broad, and it's something that's available in many community colleges. This is one of the things that we're doing with this, our new partnership here, is to really work with communities on making sure that they're developing processes for workforce training that are married to what businesses need.
You're working with communities, but one of the great distinctions of what you do is you've been working with businesses, very much so. How do you partner with business?
Well, our belief is that business needs to lead, as I said, in terms of the skills that are needed for a local business community to thrive. Let's step back for a minute. What are we trying to do with our partnership? What we're trying to do is say, all workforce training is local. We know that. It's not something that can be driven nationally. And it needs to be driven by the demand of business. What do businesses need today? What are they going to need over the next 5 or 10 years in terms of skill sets from the workforce in that community? Then what our partnership is doing is, and the reason EDA or the Economic Development Administration is a perfect partner in this is because we work with communities every day, helping them develop economic development strategies. They're called CEDS, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies. We've now inculcated into our strategy planning that we do with communities across the country, workforce training processes need to be a part of that. We have guidelines. Now, what we're doing in our partnership that's so important is bringing regions together. But if you think about it, workforce training in a region is made up of business leaders. It's made up of usually your universities and your institutions of higher learning, your community colleges, your local government, maybe your workforce board. There's a whole ecosystem, for lack of a better word, working on these issues. But if you're a university president, you tend to meet with university presidents. If you're a community college president, tend to meet with community college presidents. There's no place where the ecosystems, business leaders tend to meet with other business leaders. No place or fora where ecosystems are coming together and meeting with each other and saying, boy, this is working for us in South Carolina or in Arizona, and we're therefore, our unemployment has plummeted, our employers are happy because of the skilled labor force that we have. Nowhere are those communities coming together and sharing best practices, and nowhere are we documenting what are best practices for communities and then sharing that throughout the United States. Because one thing, unlike, let's say, other countries where there's often dictated at age 15 or 16, you're going to go one path or another. You're going to go into university or you're going to go into more of a trade, if you will. We don't do that in the United States. So we're much more local, bubble up how our communities are, where they're going to focus and what are their strengths and weaknesses. What we need to do, though, is have a mechanism where best practices are being shared so that we can address our changing economy.
Can you give me an example of that, sort of a tale where you saw it work?
Well, take South Carolina, for example, which has really become a mecca for auto production. There's a real partnership between the universities, the community college, the auto manufacturers, the state government, to create, and the auto manufacturers are really led by saying, here's what we need in order to really have the most efficient. So, for example, BMW has made their largest manufacturing production capability in the world is in the United States. It's BMW, yeah. German company, in South Carolina, and they have helped lead a development of a whole ecosystem that's now benefiting other manufacturers in that area. And in fact, their challenge is now unemployment is so low that there's a real
Good
challenge.
Problem to have
yeah,
for
exactly.
Us, yeah.
For Governor Nikki Haley, this is a real benefit. Mm-hmm. Or in Chicago, for example, Chicago put together a workforce plan or a strategy for the region that is focused on hospitality, healthcare, logistics, because we have, in Chicago's my hometown, we have really given our geography and also their density of rail, we play a really important role in terms of the logistics of the country. How do we get things from one place to another? And so they laid out 6 or 7 different sectors that they want to be strong in, and then really are tied together. The community college, what are the offerings at the community college? What are offerings that are being done at the high school level? What role is the university playing? All driven by the sectors. The sectors are driven by what are the businesses, the strong businesses locally, and also aspirationally, what does Chicago want to be? That kind of planning is really important and something that we want to celebrate, and that's what EDA is really expert at, working with communities on making such plans. What we want to do in our partnership is bring the players together to really share with one another and learn from each other.
Even before you became Commerce Secretary, you were deeply committed to the notion of using community colleges as an important link in this chain and upgrading our view of community colleges. In fact, we have a community college excellence program here at the Aspen Institute because of you. I mean, you inspired us and pushed us to do it. I noticed when you talked about Chicago in particular, Mayor Emanuel and yourself have worked together to make sure that each community college is somewhat more aligned with a particular industry and more aligned with skill sets that are going to be needed. How did you make that work?
Well, it really came from local leadership coming together across as I said, across the business sector. First, it started with World Business Chicago, which is a group of business CEOs working with the city government to say, here are the sectors we're really good at and we should focus on, where there's growth and demand for new employment. So one, it's defining what do you want to be when you grow up. Second was then making sure that the community college system was offering the kind of courses to young people that want to, who are looking to get into one of these sectors. And so it was really about the leadership of the city across, whether it was the business community leading in terms of demand and the local government leading in terms of bringing both money to bear, but also leadership over the community colleges and aligning the community colleges. The universities saying then, we're going to make sure there's a seamless process of going from getting credentialing at a community college. If you want to continue on your education, you don't have to repeat. We were finding young people were having to repeat courses to go from having been at the community college to be at the university, and that's money, and that's an impediment, right? And so why has it worked? It's worked because at the leadership level across these various sectors, across these various areas of expertise, local government, the economic development agency, the university, the community college, et cetera, we're coming together to find a solution and to the challenges, because unemployment was sticking really high in Chicago. One of the other things we did is we created something, you and I created Skills for America's Future, really working on this issue, but then we created Skills for Chicagoland's Future, and what that was is really a workforce intermediary focused on the long-term unemployed. I mean, really, even just 2 years ago, we had the long-term unemployed is defined as somebody who's been unemployed for over 6 months. Real problem had been not the short-term unemployment, that had returned to normal. It was the person who'd been unemployed for 6 months was really having a hard time finding a job. We created an intermediary to work with that cohort of folks to help them get employed. There was a real bias that existed.
Yeah, people would not interview somebody who'd been unemployed for more than 6 months.
Exactly. It was really nuts. And so we really have spent, in Chicago, they spent an enormous amount of effort to really address this issue and have made huge progress in bringing that area of unemployment
But
down.
on the community college issue, President Obama has now made that a major plank of what he wants to do, making it free and seamless to go to the first 2 years of college, if possible. How does that tie in to skills development?
Well, it's a natural place to go to gain the goal has been to have the training offered at the community college reflect the demands in the local community.
Does that mean that you think community colleges used to not do that well, that they were sort of...
Our labor secretary used to say we'd train and pray.
Right.
We can no longer afford to train and pray.
So how do you make it so it's more focused, the training you get?
Business leaders, so I'll give you Chicago as an example. Business community has partnered with the community college to say, here are the skills that we need. Please to train. And what I found when you and I started with Skills for America's Future, what we learned is that companies were willing to share their intellectual property, their training intellectual property with the community colleges, right, and say, look, partner with us, help us produce folks that are capable, not necessarily that their training ends when they enter a business, in fact, far from it, so that they're ready to do the work that's in front of them. And then businesses, let's not kid ourselves, businesses do about 80% of the workforce training in this country. So what we're talking about is the 20% that's necessary to get somebody ready to be job ready, if you will. And then they're going to get on a track where their businesses will be, the business that they're a part of will end up supporting their training. And so that's what we're trying to bridge.
Let's go back to that story you told, the amazing story of South Carolina becoming a manufacturing center with new sets of skills. If we had looked back 10, 15 years ago, we would have seen in both of the Carolinas, a furniture industry and a textile industry that were both declining in terms of the amount of employment they were doing. I don't think you or I, or certainly I would not have guessed that it would be a huge BMW plants coming in. How, since you cannot really predict what the job 10 years or 15 years from now will be, how do you predict then just the skills for any type of job that's likely to be coming along?
Well, one of the things that we encourage is working with industry, not so much so that you're pigeonholed into an industry, but that you're gaining the set of skills necessary. So take, for example, data analysis. You and I were talking about data analysis. This is an area of huge growth in my children's career time. Learning both programming and data analysis are going to be basic skills you need to have, I think, in almost any job that you're involved in.
Yeah, you told me the story when you went on manufacturing day. There was a guy who had worked at a steel plant for his entire career, but now he was analyzing data in front of 6 computer screens, and they had been able to train up for that.
Exactly. So imagine starting in steel 37 years ago, and now your job is you're running the entire factory floor off of 6 screens. Very different set of jobs.
So the skill is really human-machine interface skills.
Exactly. It's also flexibility, right? It's your willingness to continually learn, right? As an employee, it's being open to the jobs evolving and willingness. I know, look, I spent 27 years in the private sector. This is my first government job. I'll take, as my mother would say, I'll take an overachiever any day of the week. I'll take somebody who's ready, willing, and able to learn and grow in a job. And that's going to consistently be the case as we have this constant evolution. I mean, we're living in a new machine age, right? I've heard the second machine age, I've heard the fourth machine age, I don't know which number it is. All we know is that technology is causing a constant evolution. And what we also know is American workers are the most productive workers in the world. And so what we need to continue to do for the American workforce is make sure that we're recognizing the skills that are needed and training folks up. And here's the thing. You keep asking me, what are the skills? Name the 4 skills. Cybersecurity. What are the 6 skills you needed for cybersecurity 10 years ago? We didn't know we needed cybersecurity skills. What you need is folks who are open to continual learning and who are in that, and that's going to become, I think, a hallmark of employment. Is that. And so one of the things that we're doing in government is we created a checklist. So every federal program that we're doing that involves training has to meet with like 6 or 7 criteria. Employers have to be, it always starts with the employers. What does the employer need? Second is we want to make sure when we're doing training, they're earn and learn opportunities. You're earning and learning at the same time. We want to make sure we're using data to evaluate and hold ourselves accountable at the effectiveness of the training. We want to make sure there are stepping stones, seamless transition from one, let's say either certificate or graduate degree to another. We want to break down barriers to moving along in accessing training. And then we want to have more partnerships, more public-private partnerships, because what we know in the federal government, we don't have all the answers. We need to be working with the private sector more closely. That's why this new partnership is so important. And one of the exciting things is today we're also announcing that the Department of Commerce, we will take all of our skills effort and now call it Skills for Business. So we now are branding ourselves, and so that the work that EDA is doing, the work that's being done, for example, the Patent and Trademark Office, we're looking at doing apprenticeships at the Patent and Trademark Office. You know, the president has a big initiative to double the number of certified apprenticeships in the United States. Well, typically you think of an apprenticeship as something that one does in a trade. But this is really going to be training around becoming a patent and trademark officer and in that whole area of intellectual property protection. So we're really moving out of just apprenticeships for trades, but also looking for apprenticeships in healthcare, apprenticeships in computer programming and other areas.
The rebranding of it is skills for business. What's the symbolic reason for that?
Well, you know, the symbolic reason is twofold. First is the fundamental issue that we've talked about, which is demand comes from business. Jobs are created in the private sector. And so we have got to start with the business leadership and what do they need. Now, it is never far from my mind, what does the workforce need? What is it you and I have talked about? What do we need to do so that there are good middle-class jobs with good wages and earnings available to American workers? And that's something that, you know, what's the goal here? The goal is a wonderful match between a great career for someone and a business leader is able to continue to grow in their business so that they'll create more jobs.
Speaking of that, one of the great theoretical debates, which actually has very practical consequence, is whether this new machine age will actually hurt the number of jobs we have in the future, especially middle-class jobs. There'll be a hollowing out of the middle class because of automation, machinery, robotics, whatever it may be. Now, we have 2,000 years of data points about technology affecting employment. And of those 2,000 years, there are 0 data points that show that technology ends up decreasing employment. But I know even you and Larry Summers and others have been discussing whether this time it could be different.
There's enormous concern about that issue. Frankly, what I'm seeing as Commerce Secretary is the following. The United States is the #1 place in the world to invest. A.T. Kearney for the last couple of years, Goldman Sachs. Why? Because, you know, many reasons, but not the least of which is the productivity of our workers. And it's also the ingenuity of our workforce.
And both of those are tied to technology.
And the flexibility of our workforce, all of which is about the willingness of our workforce to work with technology to be more productive. Why is BMW choosing the United States as its global manufacturing, you know, its largest global manufacturing footprint? Well, it's not just the workforce. It's also our intellectual property protections, our strong rule of law, the fact that we're going to have trade agreements around the world so that they can both manufacture here and export around the world more efficiently than from other locations in the world, our low cost and abundant energy. We have many assets in this country, but it all starts with our workforce.
I pushed a book on you this morning and gave it to you, which is Bob Putnam's Our Kids. And he was here on this platform a few weeks ago talking about it. I think it's the most important book anybody can read this year because it's about the opportunity gap. And you're talking about opportunities for everybody to go into the workforce. But the gap seems to be widening between the opportunity a kid from a privileged background and with educated parents would have versus the opportunity somebody from a poor background has. And he just has graph after graph and anecdote after anecdote and data point after data point of it's getting a greater divide between the type of opportunities, starting with pre-K all the way through the internships and apprenticeships, and then the job market and the skills. How are you working, or do you see that problem, and if so, how are you working to mitigate it?
Well, I think that there's no doubt that my children or your children have, or the kids that live in our zip codes, have enormous opportunity, not the least of which is they have parents who probably have a college education, one, and that's a natural expectation, but two is they may have parents who have connections that help open a door for their child. That's the challenge that we face. In Chicago, the kids on the South Side don't have the same, let's say, they're not pushing on the same open door. And we need to rectify that. And that's why, for me, this has been such a great passion. I'm all about education, and education has been the great equalizer, at least certainly in my lifetime. I continue to believe it plays an important role. But I think we have to continue also creating opportunities. It's why apprenticeships are so critical. It's why creating structures that provide mentorship for kids is so important. It's why educating, why this image challenge in manufacturing and the idea of manufacturing day. To me, the most important people going through manufacturing day are the parents and the guidance counselors. Right. As much as, for the kids are going to be inspired, but it's also so that adults can start to see, no, there are really good middle-class careers existing in manufacturing today, and it's a growing opportunity where the skills that you are earning and learning are transferable. So this is something we have to be very persistent about.
The issue of income inequality. As you look at the numbers of the past 2 years of job growth and the economy recovering, and you look under the hood, what do you see about that issue of income inequality and what type of problem it might be?
Well, it's not good for society. We know that. It's important that we don't have a hollowing out of our middle class. It's important that we make sure that there are good opportunities that exist. And what I see is a changing economy where we place value on different skills. So if you look at being a data analyst, today a data analyst is paid over $40 an hour. That's a job that frankly didn't exist when I was a kid. This is the cybersecurity. We talked about this, which is a different form of data analysis. There are 200,000 cybersecurity jobs open right now. I suspect that career is going to be wide open for a very long time and very high pay. Welders. Welders, specialty welders, huge demand. Smart grid workers, huge demand. And good pay. These are good, solid, jobs. But what you have to do, and what we all know, is the path to finding those careers often requires a human interface with somebody who helps to guide you.
Parents,
open
mentors,
a door. Parents, mentors, friends, a coworker. I mean, I see it at the Department of Commerce. We have all kinds of folks working there who are looking to figure out where are they going next, how to manage their careers. And we spend a lot of time guiding and counseling, everybody from the folks in our security detail to folks who are in our policy shop and everything in between. And that is really an important part of the role of a manager, is to be a mentor and to set a culture of mentorship. It's not just the senior most person who's guiding. It's got to be your whole organization. As
you look, though, at the job numbers and the economic numbers of the past 2 years, what's your analysis of it right below the surface? Are we in a good recovery?
You know what? I think we're in a recovery. We're in a much better recovery than the people like to talk about.
Better than the rest of Europe and the world.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Relative to the rest of the world, we're definitely doing better. And if you look at everyone focuses on GDP growth, but if you look at unemployment, our unemployment rates continue to come down, and there's going to be bumps up and down. But I feel as though what we've done is the economy the foundation of our economy is far stronger. If you look in the 90s and the 2000s, a lot of our economy was built on bubbles. We had tech bubbles, we had housing bubbles. We're not sitting in an environment of bubbles. These are far stronger foundation of our economy. It's been hard. It's been very hard. We all we either have our own kids or friends of kids or our peers who've been either laid off during this process or have had a hard time finding jobs. It's getting better and better, and it's not even across the United States, but it's much stronger than it was. We still do not have the kind of growth in the housing industry we should. We have not invested in infrastructure the way we need to. That would be a significant impact on our economy, but Congress has not made that commitment yet, and we need to. We have $2 to $3 trillion of deferred investment. We need to pass the trade agreements because those are job creators, those are good for our economy, because they will open markets like Asia to American businesses. And I'll put in a plug for the Trade Promotion Authority and as well as for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Asia is going from 500 million consumers to somewhere over 3 billion in the next 15 to 20 years. We've never seen this in the world, that large of consumer-based growth. Our companies need to be a part of that in order to be leaders in the future, because otherwise companies that will come back, and there's very little barrier to entry to investing in the United States, whereas there's enormous market access barrier to investing in Vietnam or Malaysia or other parts of Asia. These agreements level the playing field for not just market access for your business leaders, they begin to level the playing field for our workforce, because there are new labor standards included in these agreements, as well as environmental standards that insist upon minimum wage, insist upon the right to organize, insist upon no forced or child labor and things like that. Rules we all live by, our workforce lives by. All of this will affect the quality of opportunity for our workforce here in the United States in a very positive fashion. So it's really important that we do this.
You're going to China in a few weeks. What's the mission?
I was just there last week.
That's right.
And what we did was we took clean energy companies to China. So China has made a commitment to have 20% of its energy by 2030 be non-fossil fuel based. China has world-class solar, wind, and hydro capabilities. What they don't have is the ability to connect all that to the grid. They don't have technologies to do carbon capture. There are a lot of technologies they don't have that we do. They're a $90 billion marketplace per year of clean energy, and we have a de minimis amount of market share. Our companies want greater access, so that it's about helping them reach their clean energy goals. We've all heard about the challenges of their air and their pollution, and I'm here to tell you it's true. If you haven't been there, it's a real challenge, and their people are aware of it. Their population is not just the folks in Beijing, but a real challenge for them. So this is a place where we could work cooperatively together to try and help solve not just their climate problems, but obviously those affect us as well.
Before I turn it over, let me go right back to what we're here today to announce, which is the
Skills for Business
and our
partnership.
And today we're beginning to accept applications at the Aspen Institute, right, Maureen? And a process of applications from regional teams and others. It'll include business, education, public agencies. Tell us about that approach, and without putting too much pressure on Maureen, what do you want to have come out of this?
Well, I think that I have enormous confidence in Maureen, having worked with her before this, so she's up for the challenge. But what's success look like? We're talking about bringing together 6 different regions and bringing together leaders from business, from the community colleges, from the universities, from the local government, from the economic development offices, so that those regions can learn from each other. We can develop case studies of best practices. We can develop a set of tools that can be used by other communities to improve. So we're using convening to learn from each other and develop, really a set of case studies of how to better improve your own region for workforce training. And my hope is that out of this, we have more communities that want to participate, that you have such satisfied customers that the demand is that we do it again. And that the final part of this is for the Department of Commerce. We play a role in the partnering with you, in convening and helping develop the tools. Our goal then is to take the learnings and put them into, we work with hundreds of communities around the country in helping them develop economic development strategies, is to take those learnings and put them into the community economic development strategy processes that we use with communities across the country. And this is a way of beginning to lift everybody.
So if anybody out there is interested, go to our website, find Maureen Conway's name, and email her or anybody with our anybody on her team that you find on the Our Team part of the Aspen Institute website. Let me open it up. Yes, sir. The fastest hand in the room. And then Diane here will be next.
Fred Stahl, previously Boeing and MIT. It looks to me like there's a powerful and emerging change in how we're going to be managing manufacturing. And what it is, I think we're going to be transferring more responsibility and authority to workers on the front line. And so it's tapping into those things you talked about of the knowledge of the workers, their ingenuity, and their flexibility. My question is, shouldn't we be training our workers to have the leadership skills needed to step into that in the future?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, because you're exactly right. What's happening is the decision-making and power is devolving right to the factory floor worker, not necessarily to the manager, but to the worker, to problem solve right there on the ground and to have a continuous improvement process. And so the democratization of authority requires that individuals develop skills of personal leadership, personal conflict resolution, and talents to be able to manage as they're evolving change, as well as confidence to make choices that have ripple effects across the factory floor. And working with colleagues, not just alone, but in groups and teams to make these decisions. So absolutely, these kinds of skills are necessary. And as I said, there's a base level of skills that one gets, I think, before one enters into the job market or one upskills into a new job. But then fundamentally, most businesses, as I said, about 80% of workforce training is going on in businesses. And that's where a lot of it will evolve. But these, I hate the word soft skills, leadership skills, management skills, problem-solving skills, communication skills, are fundamentally skills that can be obtained in grade school, high school, community college, through university. This is not something that just starts when you walk in the front door of your first job.
Diane, yeah, and then, yeah.
Diane Silber, clinical psychologist. I'm interested in the opposite side of the spectrum in terms of skills. The students coming into community college and to the apprenticeship programs, are they prepared from secondary education with the basic skills of reading and mathematics?
It's a real challenge, at least from what I know. One of the other things I did was sit on the school board in Chicago, which is frankly one of the more challenging roles I've ever played in my life. The responsibility for our young people and making sure that they're getting basic fundamental reading and writing skills. It is more and more a challenge. I think that, here's why I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because what I saw was when you had the both teacher and computer interface working with young kids third graders, second graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, in terms of helping young people really evolve at their own pace and along their own trajectory. So more personalized individual training. So if you thought about it, I have no trouble with, math, with multiplication, but I have trouble with division. Walter's challenge is 2-digit multiplication. We should be working on different problem sets at the same time, not exactly doing the same work all at the same time. That interface has tremendous potential. And what I saw that was so encouraging to me is the teachers' enthusiasms for working with students and using technology at the same time so that kids can have more individualized learning platforms, but teachers not feeling threatened by that, but instead celebrating what kinds of accomplishments they could have with their whole class. Because if you think about a class, it's a range of capabilities. And so I think more and more, that's why I think Connect Ed is so important. I think the idea that we're going to more and more leverage our teachers with technology. I'm not saying you replace teachers, because teachers are an incredibly important role in kids' learning. And also learning is going to change. If you think about what we've learned from Coursera and edX and other organizations that, if you make these sort of 10 to 15 minute packets of information, testing, understanding, and then moving forward. Often what teachers are learning from that is, they'll do the lecture portion, and through the testing, we'll know, okay, kids did not get this concept. We have got to go back in the classroom and work on that concept, as opposed to everybody understood this concept, and we don't need to spend more time on that. It allows for much more targeted learning. So I'm optimistic that we're going to get better at the fundamental skills that technology has a role to play in helping us do that. Not replacing teachers, as an aid.
Mm-hmm. Right there, thank you.
Hi, I'm Catherine McClellan from the Manufacturing Institute, Partners in Manufacturing Day. So I loved hearing how much you talked about that this morning. One of the places that we're stuck with, I love hearing about how businesses are aligning with community colleges to make sure that the courses are there to meet the skills. But how are you going to leverage this partnership to make sure that there's credit alignment at the community colleges as well? Because there are very few manufacturing pathways at the community college level that are currently aligned with academic credit, meaning that they're terminal courses.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the areas of focus has been the idea of partnering not just with a business leader, but with industry to develop credentials. And I know the BRT has been focused on getting different
Business Roundtable.
Business Roundtable has been working with different industry associations to try and develop credentialing that is both transferable, well understood within an industry, but also stackable in the sense that you can build upon it, or seamless transition to more education. But it's an area that I think needs a lot more attention, and frankly, it's where the industry associations have a role to play. Now, it's not typically the job of an industry association to focus on credentialing, but I think that I'll bet you guys have an education subcommittee, and I'll bet this is a hot topic. And that's where I think partnering with the community college, the American Association of Community Colleges, is really critical, because we have too many one-off credentials.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I think you had your hand up really early, so let me grab you. Yeah, I think just trying to.
Good morning.
Go back
Thank
and
you.
forth.
Thanks both of you for a marvelous job you're doing. We appreciate that. Girish Seshagiri from Peoria, Illinois. I have an initiative there that meets all your criteria. It's employer-led. It's an earn-learn model. My point is that it's taken too long. I've been working on it for 15 months now, and we'll have the first cohort of 15 people in the local community college getting the first in the nation degree, associate degree in secure software development. So the barriers are these, I think, and this is where my question is, what kind of help we can get from the government to do this? First of all, I think there's a tremendous misconception about apprenticeships in general. And people understand internships, but they don't understand a a direct connection between education and the job through the apprenticeship model, and that's a problem. The companies have a reluctance to invest in people. The apprenticeship model requires, and I'm telling the companies in that area that it's going to take about $90,000 over a 3-year period to invest in these people. But you're already doing that. You just don't realize it. Like you're pointing out, 80% of the training is done by industry. So that one. The community colleges are not quite aware of the change that they have to do in terms of delivery of the courses and instruction.
Great. Why don't we let you, because you've done community college, address the notion of how to improve apprenticeships in the United States?
Well, that's one of the things that the Labor Department is doing now, is trying to double the number of apprenticeships. So there's a need, and to broaden the industries within which apprenticeships are available. And so this has been a big effort by both the Department of Labor and the Department of Commerce. And I think they just announced, where's Kate? Is back here somewhere.
Stand up.
Kate,
Kate,
stand up. I think. Yeah,
Derek?
there he is, right back here. So he could tell you more about our whole effort on apprenticeships.
Yeah. Do you want to, there's a microphone right next to you, sir.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Secretary. So our $100 million, our historic investment that the President asked us to do, $100 million in apprenticeship, closes this week. So hurry up and get your applications in. It'll develop 25 or so innovative models across the country. We're all working together in a very huge effort to really blow it out of traditional labor, construction, and trades, which is great. We should keep doing it, into, as Secretary says, IT, healthcare, manufacturing, cybersecurity. So there's a lot of strategies. It's a lot of interest across the country, and we keep building on that. And we're up about 65,000 in number in the last year. So we've already increased it by 65,000 apprenticeships, and we're moving.
Maybe I can take a leave from the Institute and get an apprenticeship in the trademark and patent office you talked about. That's how Einstein started, so I figured It's a good place to start. I'll be way back, since I don't want the people in the back to feel left out.
Hi, Colleen LaRose from the Northeast Regional Employment and Training Association. First, I want to thank you so much for creating the idea of sector strategies. I think Michael Porter up at Harvard Business School has been trying to teach us this for a very long time, and the rest of the world has sort of grabbed hold of it, and the United States seems to be not quite as advanced in that. So I want to thank you for that. My one fear about this, though, is that we may begin to be driven by only big business. And my understanding is that it's small and medium enterprises that hire the most people. So how do we teach small and medium enterprises how to grow their businesses, for instance, with like an economic gardening program or something like that? How do we teach them to expand their businesses so that it creates a need to create jobs?
Well, we work with a lot of different business sectors in terms of trying to help them grow. You know, for example, one of the, I'll go back to manufacturing. We have something called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership at the Department of Commerce, where we work with local manufacturers to help them adopt world-class practices so that they can remain globally competitive. We also at the Department of Commerce have something called the U.S. Export Assistance Center, where there's over 100, I think 108 centers around the United States where we work with companies to help them determine which markets around the world their products will be competitive so that they can, and then we have foreign commercial service officers in 75 countries around the world where we help you navigate locally to grow your business. So we do a lot to try, and as we say, our job is to, at the Department of Commerce, is to try and create the conditions for businesses to grow so that they will create jobs. We partner with the Department of Labor in terms of the training. You know, most of the money, the grant money, comes from the Department of Labor. And what we've done is partner with them to try and to work on the conditions for those grants so that they're employer-led and job-driven, so that what we're doing is trying to have less of, as the Secretary of Labor would say, train and pray, and more of a seamless approach to skills acquisition and training into various sectors in our economy.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let me, if I don't mind, I'm trying to do it in the order I saw, and then we'll try to get to you, and that may be time to start wrapping it up.
Good morning. I'm Michael Petrick from Casa, Maryland, and really appreciate this new ambitious program by the Commerce Department. My question is, one thing we hear when we talk with employers in our workforce development program is they're very much progressing and wanting to go towards a more diverse workforce, but they often don't have the tools they need to diversify their workforce. So I'm wondering if any of this program will include, including more diversity in industries that have not been traditionally diverse, including new American populations and non-English speakers to this program as well.
Maybe we'll let Maureen and Jay answer that.
Yeah.
Sure. Just briefly, in terms of including diverse populations in the partnership, I think one of the things that the secretary mentioned earlier is that a lot of these issues are really driven locally, and I think one of the things that we're looking for in terms of the applications and how we're hoping to work with partnerships within a community is that they raise up what are some of the issues that they're struggling with in their community, and we think about how they can work across the lines of business, education, community organizations, public agencies, and others to think about how do we address that. So if this is a real issue in a community, how can that sort of come from them, that this is an issue that they want to work on together, and we can sort of facilitate that.
Jay, you want to?
I would concur. I would say that in our experience with EDA working with communities, that's where the focus of the priorities being identified, the workforce issues being identified by those communities. A very good example is the work that we do in the Native American tribes across this country. They have a very specific, different set of needs, different from some of the rural communities and urban communities we work in. So by having them as a part of that conversation, really having our staff on the ground, it gives us that extra sensitivity to make sure that we're addressing those and being very inclusive and diverse in terms of our investments and our approaches.
Ted Wells from STEM Connector. One of the issues we've seen in some of the work we've been doing is like that students in STEM fields or whatever aren't aware of the opportunities that exist in the workforce, especially students from low-income backgrounds. So, this is a great set of infrastructure that y'all are putting in place, but is there, is a build it and they will come approach might not necessarily be one that works. Are there any strategies to ensure that students and educators and those who work with them at the secondary level are helping to inform students about the opportunities that you're talking about? Because some of these jobs didn't exist 15 years ago, 5 years ago even.
Where's Kate? Kate, do you want to talk about the Glassdoor effort and some of the things that we're doing to make sure matching that's going on, some of the pilots?
One example, the Glassdoor example that we are working on, actually in partnership, we have EDA, so Jay can follow up on the National Advisory Council for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, is for the first time focusing on workforce development as one subcommittee of what it's doing as part of its advisory role to the Secretary via EDA. A member of that advisory group, Glassdoor, is working with us to kind of touch on your question and comment about how do you prepare for what are the jobs of the future, basically in STEM, where a lot of job growth in IT, but there's a big gap in data. Most people in this room know we don't have a lot of localized data of what the supply and the demand is, and take a state, for example. So we're working with Glassdoor to do a pilot to look at Virginia, to obtain some of their unemployment data and anonymous unemployment data, to do some matching between the supply side and the demand side. So Glassdoor has a treasure trove of information about jobs available, skills that are needed, and by developing a partnership with the state of Virginia and obtaining their information about the supply side, who needs jobs, what skills do they have, the idea here is to develop a demonstration project that potentially we could share with other states. So it's early stage, but I think it's something addresses your question a little bit about how are we thinking forward about what are the skills needed for jobs that are open now and going forward.
And then LinkedIn is working on a different approach. So what we're trying to do is use technology to try and deal with the supply-demand question and equation.
I'm going to end with a topic that's sort of a future-looking topic, which is the evolution of the American workforce seems to have a couple of trends that have accelerated recently. One is that young people coming out of either college or career ready from high school are not necessarily joining big corporate entities, but they're creating a portfolio where they're juggling a lot of jobs. Things like the Affordable Care Act makes that more possible because you don't need to join a corporate entity. And secondly, I know Steve Case and people with the Rise of the Rest have been working with the administration going across America. We're going to New Orleans in a couple of weeks to talk about entrepreneurs and startup and that culture. So how are you dealing with people who are not going into traditional, I'm going to get a paycheck employment?
So one of the things we do through EDA is we work with incubators and accelerators to help support that effort, which is the whole innovation culture and the entrepreneurship culture in the United States, which frankly is the envy of the world. There's a country I go to around the world that says, how do we replicate what you've got? And what's so exciting to me is that we're really doing a lot to elevate and support innovation and entrepreneurship outside of the traditional centers of Boston, Silicon Valley, let's say Austin, Texas, Boulder, and with the efforts like what Steve Case is doing and what EDA is doing to actually help fund a number of these organizations. We're helping entrepreneurs around the United States get access not only to mentorship and to training, because remember, they're going from a business idea to a business plan to how to actually create an organization legally, to having to hire people, et cetera. That whole process is something daunting if you're don't come from, folks who can help you do that. And so these are really centers that are able to help young folks, or old folks. It doesn't matter what age you are, just any entrepreneur. And it's very exciting what's happening there.
I will put in a little plug that we've just started this past month with Eric Lavin, who ran, one of the people at Propeller in New Orleans, one of these incubators, has come here so we can have an incubation at the Aspen Institute, both for for-profit and non-profit entrepreneurs. People want to be social entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in the private sector, because that notion of bringing people together and giving them the mentorship, giving them the skills, giving them the sort of support structure they need allows people to start new enterprises. And what about this portfolio approach that many people are doing? How are we, besides the Affordable Care Act, helping allow that to flourish in America?
Well, I think that, we are living in the age of the micro entrepreneur, right? So think about what technology is allowing to have happen. You can drive your UberX, for 4 hours a day and be going to, night school or day school or whatever, and you can be volunteering part of your time. I always love talking to the UberX driver. What exactly is and they are portfolio folks. The same is true with Airbnb. I think this sharing economy is allowing people to put together a portfolio lifestyle and income streams that is something we've never seen. We're unlocking entrepreneurship in this country in a way that is really revolutionary.
And that might be the answer to the question of, will technology create jobs or destroy jobs? Once again, we're seeing it create jobs.
Yeah, one of my questions is, are we capturing all that in GDP?
Well, we're certainly capturing it in the country, and eventually the numbers will catch and the statistics will catch up with us. Any final words?
No, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Secretary Pritzker. And thank you all. This was very nice, great questions.